What are the lessons that we should learn from what we've just been through the past 4 years?
Yeah. Well, imagine you're an individual who has been challenged to run a 100-yard dash, and you train and train and train for that. And the consequences are significant for whatever reason. The day you go to run it, they say, oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you, it's a marathon. And you go, what? Yeah, I just trained for 100 yards. And you tell me I got to run a marathon right now? Well, that's what pandemics are like. We came into COVID with the idea the first 2 months, it'd be bad, but then it'll be done and over with. We've been moving on. Okay. Well, as you saw, COVID was a 3-year minimum pandemic. And I think that was one of the hard things that I found early on, because I envisioned it would be at least a 2 or 3 year and more situation. I wrote a op-ed in the Washington Post in March of 2020 saying, do not do lockdowns. They won't work, because this is a zero-sum game. If you die in the first 3 months, that's not good. But if you die in the next 3 months, that's not good either. Oh, by the way, if it's the third 3 months or the fourth 3 months or the fifth 3 months, you're still dead. And there was no way we were going to lock down our country for 3 years. And so we needed to find policies and approaches that could help us navigate that. And that's what I wrote about. And, I got a tremendous amount of pushback from my colleagues, not those who you thought might be against mandates, et cetera, but colleagues. On top of it, what we ended up doing really wasn't a lockdown. In Minnesota, for example, we had a stay-at-home order for all workers, except for essential workers. Well, the final listing of essential workers made up 82% of the workforce. Now tell me, is that a lockdown? I mean, tell me. So I think that we didn't understand going into it. And in March of 2020, I put an estimate out and said I thought we could see 800,000 deaths in the next 3 years. And you might have thought, I was saying something bad about your mother. It was not well received. And again, it was because people didn't envision that. And 3 years to the day, actually 18 months later, we hit 800,000 deaths. And so I think that that's the first thing, is we got to have a mindset change. Okay. And until we have that, we're always going to be flying by the seat of our pants and not doing what's effective. Now, in terms of school closings, an example, I never for a moment thought that we could keep schools closed for 3 years. But what happened in the first year of the pandemic, the virus, as we knew it, before we hit the Alpha and Delta and Omicron variants, was much less impactful on kids. And we didn't see, we had 120 some deaths in kids in that first year. But by that time, people all concluded it's not a big deal for schools. They didn't realize when we reopened up the second year, there were 800 deaths in kids. The third year, there were over 700 deaths in kids. And what happened is we were going by data based from the first year, when in fact the pandemic was changing over time. Now, what we should have done is, as we had an impact, is what I believe is done snow days. If we had major activity happening, say you're going to take 2 or 3 weeks off, give the data as to why you're doing what you're doing, show them if we get below this number of hospitalizations or we get below this number of infections, we'll go back to what we were doing. We never did any of those kinds of things. We just somehow, did our lockdowns and then almost made it as if somehow now we're going to, just it'll be different now, and it wasn't. And so I think that was a big one right there, is where, we were running 100-yard dashes when we got into this thing, when everybody needed to know how to run a marathon.